They are also a third-generation native signer and singer. Yes, I said singer of American Sign Language, and they identify as a non-binary Black Indigenous person of color and a member of the LGBTQAI plus community. From 2010 until 2017, Brandon worked as a professional circus acrobat in San Francisco, honed their circus training and dance techniques through various collaborations in theater, film, and opera. And in 2019, Brandon graduated from NYU's Tisch School of the Arts with an MFA in dance and new technology, and currently works as a professional artist, choreographer, director, editor, and ASL artist, both in New York City and remotely. And I know that Brandon be out in them social justice streets, because one of them times I was recently in those social justice streets at a huge citywide gathering designed to ensure that our organizations were prepared to get out the vote and make sure our community members were educated. Who do I see standing at the front of the room but Brandon, signing and making sure that the translations that were necessary so that all of our community members were educated about what was happening was right there in the building. And it was so great to see you. I was like, I know that person. Brandon, welcome back to the show. It's a pleasure to have you back.
Lurie, thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to see you and chat with you.
Yes, it is. And I want to talk about all the things that we have on the agenda for us to discuss today. But I also want to return to that meeting that I just referenced a moment ago, because while I was in the meeting, one of the things we learned about was all of the ways, because, here I am thinking we're doing the amazing work, making sure that our communities are educated about the vote and that they have information. And I'm looking around at this very diverse room and I'm like, look at us doing such a good job. And then we heard from a community member who was a part of a community that uses ASL as the primary mode of communication. And this was a Black woman who was doing a lot of work in collaboration with great organizations like the National Action Network. And the thing she proceeded to inform us about all of the ways that communities that are navigating disability and communities that are navigating different capacities in terms of hearing and speaking and communicating, and just made it clear that there is so much more work to done, because there are millions of New Yorkers. And I believe one of the numbers she referenced that really stuck with me, the same number of Black New Yorkers who are no longer in the state of New York due to policies related to economics and education is the same number of Black New Yorkers who also do not have access to the supports that they need because they are navigating life as people who primarily speak American Sign Language. I was horrified. I was embarrassed. I mean, she didn't know I was in the room. She didn't know me from a can of paint, but it was one of those, oh girl, you think you good? Look at how many of our people are not being serviced. And it was such an important reset and reframe. So I just wanted to thank you for being a part of translating that conversation, because I think if people left out of there as impacted as I was, hopefully all of us are back at our organizations changing the way that we approach this work so that we include people who are navigating the world with different skills. I just wanted to say that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And, that is one of my life motivations, is making sure that my community, the Black community, the deaf community, the Black deaf community can be as informed as possible, especially when it comes to things like voting. Another thing that's really important that people should recognize is the importance of language acquisition compared to language deprivation. One of my causes, one of my purposes is to really encourage early language acquisition for American Sign Language, for deaf children specifically, and just for the overall benefit of people in general. I'm a hearing person. I tend to say I can hear. There are hearing people who don't know sign language, who have no relationship to deaf culture or ASL. There are CODAs, children of deaf adults, or grandchildren like myself of deaf adults, who grew up within the deaf community and deaf culture that's in our hearts. And we can hear, but we're a little different from hearing people who don't know anything about the culture. And then you have deaf people who have a very, wide range of hearing capacity or not. But all of us would benefit humongously if we were exposed to American Sign Language from the beginning, from jump, from birth. That, like myself, it is a privilege to be able to have this language as mine, that I get to share and make sure that my people are informed. So language acquisition, early language acquisition, and just being mindful of language deprivation, which is what that woman was discussing. Her name's Opal.
Oh,
Opal
okay.
Gordon. She
You're
is an
pointing at
amazing.
the jewel that he
Oh,
had. So
that's
okay, I
right.
guessed
That's
the
right.
wrong jewel.
Yes, I know, right? Yes. So her name sign is Opal. But she's amazing, and she is a deaf activist and advocate. And she discussed how many deaf people, are born into hearing families. 90% of deaf people are born into hearing families, which means that their language, the ASL, they don't get that language until they find the deaf community, until their parents give them the opportunity to meet other deaf people. So that's where language deprivation comes from, which then kind of sets back any language if you're deprived of your language, right?
Right, right. And one of the things she also talked about that was horrifying to me was the lack of literacy rates within the Black deaf community. And again, had not because I have I don't think it's a luxury to not think of it. I have the capacity to not think about these things. I don't think it's a luxury to be ignorant of what other people are navigating. I know we sometimes say I have the luxury of not. It's not a luxury. It's ignorance. And one of the things she talked about though was this fact that there are high levels of illiteracy within the Black deaf community. I think within deaf communities generally, but she was highlighting specifically the challenges that the Black deaf community has. Again, educating a room full of people who were really feeling good about all the good work we are doing and just really helped to remind us that there are other things we have to consider. I remember her sharing stories about what happens if a person who speaks ASL, a deaf person, if they are put in handcuffs, for example, and their handcuffs, if those handcuffs are behind their back, what that means. You have literally stopped that person from being able to communicate. And there were so many machinations that she took us through and experiences. And I learned more in her brief testimony than frankly I did the rest of the conversation, rest of the program. But it was so empowering and such a powerful reminder that we show up in a variety of gifts, skills, talents, bodies, capacities, and abilities. And the best parts of our energy, I think, should be going towards figuring out how we bring all of that to bear so that none of us are left behind. And I just, again, thank you and the members of the deaf community who were in that room to make sure that all of us who are social justice activists and trying to do this work on the ground have additional layers that we get to think through so that we can ensure that we're actually being effective at that work. So
Absolutely.
thank
Yeah.
you.
And then one other thing I want to add to that is just the
Of course.
importance of representation, because I have my own personal relationship with Opal herself, right? As a person, as a deaf person, I know how she communicates, how she expresses herself. And if you can imagine how important it is to have someone who is speaking using their voice to represent your voice, just how important it is, that relationship and that trust. I am privileged enough to be able to speak and sign for myself. That is how I express myself. ASL is my first language, and it's a part of how I communicate. I choose my signs I choose my words through my signs, and I don't have to have someone voice for me. When I do have someone voice for me who's an interpreter, it is a different experience because I can hear them, so I have to kind of turn them off. And if they're not picking the words that I want, I'm being as clear as possible and they're still doing their own thing. Just imagine how challenging that is for deaf people.
Right. Right. Have you ever had a situation where you had to stop the translation from happening because it was just so out of whack with what it was you were signing?
I have corrected people who are voicing for me, but I do it in sign language. So I'll be signing whatever I'm saying, and then I'll hear something that's not what I said, and I'll turn and I'll fix it, and then they'll say it. But it is an interruption, and again, it is a privilege to be able to do that because if you are deaf and you can't hear that, you are just trusting that that person is going with what you're saying.
Right. My God. Okay. So another example of how we can all do better. And I'm just glad that we've got insight on what that better can be. I want, if we can now to turn, I stumbled in the introduction because I said that you were both I said a singer of ASL. And then I corrected myself and said, no, 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 a signer. And then you said, no, both. Tease that out for us for people who could not conceptualize what it might be like to be singing in ASL. Give us a sense as to what you meant there.
Yeah, of course. So a lot of times when I'm performing, and let's say there's a singer. And it's my responsibility to represent that music in sign language. Oftentimes, I will pull in a hearing interpreter or a deaf interpreter who will be there to represent just the words of the program that are just being spoken. Because spoken language, platform interpreting of just speeches and just prose, is very different from signing music because music has its own layers of nuance. You've got your instruments, you've got whatever notes there are, you've got the metaphors of the poetry itself, how the music is delivered. And then if you're signing what someone is singing, that person has their own interpretations of what they want to express. So it could be the same poem delivered by two separate singers, and you might think, oh, I have the signs. I know what they're signing or what I'm signing for them. But how they decide to sing, Billie Holiday's what have you, you have Strange Fruit, for example. That in and of itself is is nuanced, right? And however that person decides to sing that, your signs will change, my signs will change. So
Wow.
that for me is parallel to singing, and I personally have a deep relationship with music, with dance, always growing up with music and dance, and the knowledge that I have behind the nuances of music and dance make their way into how I express
Mm.
sign language with music. So deaf people do call it singing in sign language.
Mm. And you recently gave a TEDx talk in Pasadena about the title of which was "Channeling the Spirit of Music in American Sign Language," which I think is what you're intimating now. Talk to us about the overarching theme of that speech and the impacts that it's had.
Yeah, definitely. So, channeling the spirit of the music in American Sign Language, that is that is my real purpose here on this earth. It is an honor to be able to hear music and embody it and then express it. One deaf person who I love and work with often as a director of artistic sign language, her name is Patrice Creamer. She is my mama Patrice. She once told me when we were doing a performance together, she said, hearing people listen to music to make them make themselves feel emotions, feel better, solve, issues within that music can get inside and shift. And when we use sign language, we need to pick signs that touch people with emotion
Mm.
in the same way. And I was like, whoa, mind blown from this deaf woman's perspective, right?
Ah.
Pick signs that evoke emotion, that give you goosebumps, that are thoughtful, not just throwing signs, just like people don't just throw music into the air.
Right.
So going back to my TED talk, that is really about the difference between well, it's really about my own personal self-expression, the fact that um ASL being my first language, I do have the capacity to turn my voice off and use sign language in a silent manner. And then I can turn my voice on and voice for myself, express myself in sign language, and be understood. And for me, communication is about being understood however you want to express yourself. So, having the right to use sign language and speak, and the right to express ourselves in the way that we are fighting for every day in this country, that's what that is about. At the same time, one interesting aspect of that talk is that I have a voice recording of myself that I hit and it goes and you can hear my voice in the air and I'm interpreting my own self. And that is an interesting aspect because for hearing people, they get to hear my voice, but they see the 100% ASL that I'm giving. And then you get to see and feel the juxtaposition of when I'm talking and signing. And then for deaf people, if they see me turn my voice off, then I'm really code switching to fit
Wow.
deaf eyes. And I think that that's what that TED talk is really about. It's about code switching. It's about self-expression. It's about honoring all aspects of ourselves and not denying any part of ourselves.
Mm. I think that's so, it's absolutely fascinating to me. And I feel like when I watch you and you all who are listening in the audience, you'll get a chance to get a slice of this experience. Although I really encourage everybody to take a look at the TED Talk itself. But when I'm watching you sign, one of the reasons I love that we have a video component is that people are able to literally see every response that you give, everything that you speak audibly, you are also signing. And I think for people, I sometimes feel like, I think I learned a sign just now. I know what not means. I think I'm starting to pick it up. And I think it is such an enriching experience to be able to engage in dialogue of this sort. One, because everyone is able to learn from each other, yes. But also, we get to see the beauty of the multilinguistic capacity that you hold. And I can only imagine how fulfilling it must be for you to be able to walking out your purpose in this way and providing such comfort for people who are definitely beneficiaries of it. And to be an educator as well. It's just absolutely amazing. And you are continuing your artistry. You have this artist in residence series for PBS with Soul Signs, making music visible. And as I understand it, this is actually a pilot episode for a much larger project. Talk to us about this project.
Definitely, yes. So my company, Up Until Now Collective, of which I am a co-founder, with my partner Kevin Newbury, who is a theater, film, and opera director, and
Is
our
that the person we
co-founder.
met when you came to the studio?
Yes, that is the person you met
Please
when you
tell them I
came
said
to the
hello.
studio. I will tell Kevin hello from Lurie Daniel Papers. Definitely. And then we have Jecca Berry, who is our other co-founder, who is an amazing executive director, or executive producer. And so, in our work together, we have created a series of American Sign Language music videos. We had five that we were kind of commissioned to create, that were of Black female singers that we honored and translated their work into ASL and made videos with the deaf community. And then we did three that were focused on opera. And you can they were on streaming platforms that were up and running for a few years. And then, as we know, so much has changed over these past few years, politically, culturally. So we are the holders of those videos at this moment, of those films. But we would love to be in contact so we can come and show those films and discuss them. They're incredibly entertaining. And actually, I get to go to Oregon next year, and we'll have a banquet, and I'll get to show some of these films and discuss them. So there's a lot of different approaches when it comes to education, culture, communication, the sense of belonging, that all of those films really encompass. So I would love to come and present on those. But right now, what we're talking about is the PBS All Arts, the artist in residence that I received. So that was in 2024. It was released in 2025 in April 15th, which is National Deaf Awareness Week. And that was so special. And so basically, we worked with singer songwriter Morgan James, who wrote a song called Drown, with her husband, Doug Womble. And they are amazing humans. And incredibly talented. So I was inspired by their music, their song, and I worked with a deaf director of artistic sign language named Rosa Lee Tim, and she is a Black deaf woman. And we worked closely together to translate that song. And then I worked with her and her daughter, who's a coda, and then a man named Russell Harvard, who is a deaf actor. And of course, Kevin directed it. And it's all to do with music and sign language and mermaids. And so you get to see my family, and kind of both of my grandmothers, my white deaf grandma from Washington State, and my black hearing nana from the Bronx. And we sit at a table together and we talk about what it felt like to raise little old Brandon. And this is what you get when powerful women raise you. Okay.
Mm,
But so
yes.
it's all about, yes, making music visible. And then at the end, you get to see the ASL music video that you watch be in process. So it was very special. It was an honor. And I do all of my work to honor my family and my community. And that's why we fight so hard to make this art because it's necessary for people's joy.
Yeah. What does that fight look like now in light of, as you mentioned, we're in a different political time, we're in a different cultural time. The arts are under attack. We have highlighted a number of artists and filmmakers on this show. Shout out to Byron Hurt, among others, who have tried to find creative ways of navigating what it means to have the investments in the arts to be curtailed the way that they were. How is that impacting you and the work that you do?
Oh, definitely. A couple days ago, I just went and interpreted for the NAACP. Very proud of that. That's on YouTube. That's live streamed, but it's all in support of Tish James,
Oh,
who we
yes.
are fighting for as our attorney general, and who is being targeted. And just like so many folks right now. But one thing that was so special is like when Black women are in power, things get done. People don't get left behind. They don't get forsaken. They are thought of, and energy is budgeted, as well as finance, but
Right.
energy, emotions, and finances are budgeted when Black women are in power. So, and also certain specific people are threatened when Black women are in power. So we need to recognize those things and fight for Black women to stay, maintain, and gain more power. So that's what that was about. But that's what the fight looks like for me. That's the boots on the ground. Those are the things that I say yes to and want to support. Um, and, when it comes to supporting our work, we are constantly, I mean, up until now, collective, and myself as an artist, I'm constantly having to, apply for grants that support the work that I create. We have to approach private donors because we don't have the same kinds of funding opportunities that we did even during COVID. We know how much has changed from the financial and grant making landscape in the United States. So that's why it's so important to have relationships with so many people, but especially people like yourself, Lurie, who is a powerful, intelligent Black woman who has a platform, and you work to highlight people who are doing the work. And from this kinds of work, more beautiful things happen, more people are visible, and can be supported.